So, sir, on this birthday of Dr. Gabriel Ilizarov, sir, what inspired you to go forward with Ilizarov? Or what inspired you to learn Ilizarov?
Ilizarov first came to India in 1986. We saw him in the conference for surgery in the tropics at Bombay Hospital in December 1986. I was a registrar at KM Hospital, and living at KM Hospital in Parel, I saw a lot of people walking with limp, 10% of the population walking with limp. Obviously, they had short limbs deformities, but our textbook of orthopedics and our practice of orthopedics did not have much about deformity correction and about limb lengthening. So when he first showcased his work at that conference, all of us were falling out of our chairs and we were mesmerized. And as very young and impressionable surgeons, as a particularly impressionable surgeon, I was completely besmirched and I wanted to learn this technique. That was the first introduction to Professor Ilizarov.
And when did you, sir, decide to go for it?
It's a very happy series of coincidences. I was working in the UK in 1988 and I wasn't really liking what kind of orthopedics they were doing, because I knew I wanted to come back to Akola, which is a small city in those days in India, which was not very, very well to do. So the brand of orthopedics wasn't great. And I got this opportunity to go to a conference in the US where Ilizarov was going to conduct the first ever conference in New York City. And that's how the saga began. And I got to do a fellowship with Dr. Paley, his first student from the West, outside of the Italians. And then in 1990, after coming back, I went to the Soviet Union. Before that, he came to Mumbai. Actually, Professor Ilizarov again came to Mumbai in 1989, October. And he was invited by the, I think, Singhania group for the Raymond Hospital, Singhania Hospital. And I visited him and I actually wanted to conduct his interview. And so I managed to get into his car. I traced him, the flight that he was coming in. And I got an invitation to sit in his car and I asked him some questions. And eventually that became a lead article in 3 major newspapers and magazines in India: the Sunday Times of India, the Illustrated Weekly of India, and Science Today. So Ilizarov famously asked me, is he a surgeon or a journalist? So I said, no, I just, your subject is fascinating. So he had a sense of humor. And then again, I went to Russia to learn. So Professor Ilizarov was, do you know, he was a magician. He was a true magician. They say that he was a magician amongst surgeons because he did all these wonderful things. He started limb lengthening and this deformity correction with really tough deformities. But the fact was, he was a magician. While talking to you, he could pull out a coin from your ear. And he had this, ability to perform small magic tricks. But I think the biggest magic he did was that he was able to take very simple equipment and create a biological law which enabled us to do something absolutely wonderful. Where he started, the operation theaters were not very high tech. They did take a lot of care about sterility and other things, but using simple equipment, even today, the technique never fails us. If you see the history of the development of medical technology, I find that over a period of time, a lot of techniques get outdated and get completely replaced by newer ones. A similar effort is being made by the industry to have, for example, self-lengthening nails in the last 15 years. But if you look at their history and development, they're getting more and more expensive and they're still not reliable. So Ilizarov's technique is timeless. It's like a mathematical formula which can be used endlessly.
So after learning the Ilizarov technique and getting a fellowship, what were the hurdles that you had to face? I mean, you were one of the pioneers to start the Ilizarov in India.
Yeah.
So what were the hurdles you faced initially?
Yeah. There was no Ilizarov equipment to start with. So I had to participate in the making of Ilizarov equipment till such time came as the commercial companies managed to do it. and there was nothing in Akola. We had to create a whole system, and it was a fascinating time and very, very interesting and challenging times. But we are lucky we succeeded in establishing Ilizarov techniques in Akola in India in 1989. And um, I think the biggest benefit of seeing Professor Ilizarov work in Kurgan, which is a nondescript town in western Siberia, was that I got inspired that I could do something similar here. Obviously, albeit at a very small scale. Professor Ilizarov became very famous. He was given the Lenin Prize, and he was really a very well-known personality in the Soviet Union. So they created this huge, the world's largest orthopedic hospital, 1,000 beds for him. And there were 300 doctors, and it's fantastic. But we did start the Ilizarov, and it has succeeded in Akola for the last 36 years. So I'm particularly happy about my choice, because just before that I was given a fellowship in the shock trauma unit of University of Maryland. And as I was being taken about by Tony Burgess, the chief of shock trauma, which was the biggest, most high-tech, fantastic shock trauma unit in the US at that time, and he took me through these 6 floors of the building where the chopper would bring the patient, and then they would undergo immediate surgery, etc. And in a conversation with one of the consultants, he said that, this consultant is now going to go away to Ohio, and he said that people find it difficult to replicate our model even in the US. So that woke me up. And I wanted to replicate something back in India, back in Akola, in those days when we didn't have a lot of money and technology in India. And it worked.
Wonderful.
It worked.
Sir, you have seen Dr. Ilizarov up close. So, what kind of man was he? I mean, as a surgeon, what was his extra thing which pushed him towards invent or make this incredible instrument, Ilizarov?
Oh, he's a stuff of legend. And there are a lot of legends around him, many of whom are true. The apocryphal story of him using bicycle spokes as wires is probably only apocryphal. Kurgan did have a industrial base where he managed to get these simple things done. And about him as a personality was he was very big when I met him, and he was actually towards the end of his career, and a little surprisingly almost towards the end of his life. So he was a very old man, and I did have a few one-on-one interactions with him. I was very much in awe of him, of course, and it was one of the high points in my professional life to have met him 4 or 5 times across 3 different continents, and I shall always cherish that memory.
Sir, what makes Ilizarov different from the other subspecialties in orthopedics?
Yeah, so you young folks have been exposed to so many of the newer glamorous subspecialties like arthroscopy and arthroplasty, and it gives quick results. And people say that Ilizarov is outdated. Nothing can be further than the truth. Do you know that the utility of Ilizarov in my practice, in our practice, has remained consistent, constant, and ever growing? There is no dearth of the kind of problems you can solve with the Ilizarov technique, and that's true for all over India. They say that today in modern orthopedics, the main indication of the Ilizarov technology is for very bad infected non-Indians. I agree. It excels, it shines. But virtually the utility of Ilizarov is across many wide spectrums: congenital anomalies, limb lengthening, deformity correction of all kinds, post-traumatic reconstruction, treatment of contractures. The treatment of the sequelae of osteomyelitis is the most rewarding. The treatment of poliomyelitis, where you can correct simultaneously. For example, in cerebral palsy, just yesterday we performed a 6-hour surgery in which we did SEML, single event multi-level surgeries. We corrected, by supracondylar osteotomy. The Ilizarov is wonderful for all of these conditions. And its utility is, not going to be hampered over time. I agree that the world has sped up, and perhaps the slightly longer duration of fixator wear can be a bit of an issue for some people. But if you create a system where we have created it 35 years ago, where we take care of our Ilizarov patients, it's not a problem. And we have done there are a lot of improvements. We have done lengthening over nails, which reduces the duration of external fixation. So this is a reliable technology, it's affordable, and it works. Today is a very special day. Thank you, Dr. Ishani. Today is Father's Day, today is Ilizarov's birthday, and today is Surgeon's Day. So all of us are surgeons. I wish you all a very happy Surgeon's Day. The legacy of Professor Ilizarov will live on. It will never die. Its utility will be forever a part of orthopedic armamentarium, especially for difficult problems.